Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. I wasn't sure I was going to video this or not. It's a pretty straightforward job, but as I got into it, I thought maybe I'd just go ahead and throw the camera up and at least concentrate on the focal point. In this video, I'm going to be rebuilding my RCV shafts. I've had the parts sitting on the bench for a few months. The joints in them do wear. It's a wearable item, so RCV's not going to warranty them if they start making noise, which the RCVs do over time. This will be the second time I've rebuilt these. The first ones went a little over 50,000 miles. I adjusted my steering off a couple degrees. RCV states 45 degree turning radius max. I bumped that down to about 42 just to be on the safe side. Did it help? I don't know. I've got a few more miles. When I rebuilt them the first time with about a little over 50,000 miles, 53 and change I think it was, they were clicking and clacking pretty bad, and it was exactly 4 years ago. Fast forward now to 2021, I've got just under, I think I'm at 58 and almost 60,000 miles, 58 and change on them. So I got, 5,000 plus miles more out of them by adjusting the steering off a little bit. Is that the reason? I don't know. I am anal about keeping them greased. When I tore them apart last time, they were greased properly. But anyway, so this is exactly 4 years later. I actually had the parts sitting on the bench, like I said, for a few months, knowing that this was coming up. However, the last couple trips I had taken, or excuse me, the couple of trips I had taken prior to this last one, they were quiet as could be, didn't think anything of it, so I thought, while I had everything apart, rebuilding my shocks and doing a bunch of stuff in prep for our annual URA trip, my thinking was I just go ahead and throw the rebuild kits in them while I had the tires and wheels and the shocks and everything off. But then on second thought, I thought, I wanted to see how far they'd go and see if they were going to continue to go further since I adjusted the steering last time after going through my notes. In hindsight, I probably should have just torn them apart and rebuilt them at that time, because I got about halfway through our URA trip this last week, and they started clicking and clacking. Not as bad as 4 years ago, but they were making noise on hard turns. I noticed it the first time coming down off of Black Bear, and I noticed it another day going up over, I think it was California Pass. I was going up and over. I made a couple of hard turns, trying to get around a couple of those turns without doing a three-point turn in these four-door buses. And I noticed I could hear a little bit of an audible click. It was very faint, but it was there. So I just thought, before our next Jeep gathering, I'm going to go ahead and rebuild the joints. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart. It's not going to be a step-by-step. Maybe I'll leave the camera on and fast forward through pulling the assembly apart. But a couple of tips that I can recommend is when you're doing it either on jack stands or on a lift, as you're pulling things apart, go ahead and pull it apart. But then when you get to the point where you're going to pull the axle shaft out of the axle housing, I like to I've got some short, what I did is I took tall pole jacks, 2 of them, and I cut them down for doing suspension work. So I'll throw those underneath there and crank them up a little bit to offset the axle away from the side that I'm working. That keeps the differential fluid in the differential, and it doesn't have a tendency to follow the axle shaft out as it's coming out over the seal. So that does help a little bit. And then when I move over to the other side, when I put this side together and I move over to the other side, I'll do the exact opposite. Take it down on the one side, put it up on the other. You can do the same thing if it's up on jack stands. You can take a floor jack and rock it side to side as you do one side or the other. You can set it down on jack stands higher on one side than the other. Whatever your preference is, it's just a quick little tip to help you keep the oil in the housing, in the pumpkin or the differential housing rather than out in the axle tubes. So, especially where I just serviced my differentials, only a couple thousand miles ago, I really don't want to pull that oil out and get it all through the tubes and everything. So, I'm going to go ahead and pull this apart. Once I get to that point, we'll put it on the bench and I'll show you how to pull the shaft apart, as well as change all 6 of the balls and the race and carrier stuff inside the joints. So again, this part's pretty straightforward. If you can pull your brakes and unit bearing and everything, you can do this part pretty easy. and I don't know that anybody really has any problems rebuilding the shafts at the workbench. I know RCV has a video out on it. There's a couple others that do, but I just figured, what the heck, I'll throw the camera up and show you another one. So follow along, and we'll go ahead and get these axle shafts out and get them rebuilt and get this thing back together. All right, so I've got this raised up. This is about maybe 2 inches, only a couple degrees from the other side. So we'll go ahead and go to pull this. And again, I'm just using a hook tool, and I'm just going to kind of get behind it. You don't want to damage it, you just want to get behind it and create a little bit of a void for that vacuum to break. There you go. Here we go. Just had to, and then guide it as it's coming out, so you want to guide it through that boot. There we go. Shaft's out. Take your shaft now, stand it up in your vise. This is where I recommend donning some safety glasses to make sure. And you should just be able to give it a wrap and it'll pop right off. There is a retaining ring right here, and it should come, yep, it comes in the new kit. So, and the kit for these, for the Dana 44s anyway, is a D44-R, and it's the RCV rebuild kit. Comes with the new cage, inner and outer, 6 balls, and the retaining ring for the end of the shaft. So at this point, I'm going to take the shaft out of the vise, put it over in a solvent tank so I can clean it off. We can take the stub shaft, stand it up in the vise. And what you want to do is drive the cage down. There's 2 of them. You want to drive it down on the opposite side of where the balls are at. So then, and there's no gentle way of going about this. Stuck in there pretty good. Okay, there's 4 of the, ooh, got the screwdriver all greasy though with the Molly synthetic grease. And should only be 1 remaining. Okay, there's the 6 balls. Now you want, sorry, jet's flying over. I'm about 10 miles north of Hill Air Force Base. So get a little bit of jet flyovers every once in a while. Okay. Now you want to finesse that up and out of there, which is sometimes you want to find a window doesn't want to pop up out of there. There we go. You want to find a flat on the window, and you got to orientate the inner race where the splines are at with the outer cage to get it just right to come up. So set that aside, and you don't need to see me wash this. I'm going to go over the solvent tank. I'm going to clean up all the parts, and then we'll reassemble. Okay. So after a quick trip to the solvent tank, got everything cleaned up. So we'll pull the retaining ring off. Put it over with the old parts. And you can see, I mean, it's a little tight in there, but I don't see any wear too bad, but I guess it's so microscopic. Inside the bell here, it's not, you can't really feel it. It looks like it's just like where it's worn off the coating, but you really can't feel anything in there per se. So I've checked it, there's no burrs, everything feels good. So all this is all been come out of this, fresh out of the solvent tank, the boot's out of the solvent tank. So let's go ahead and put the new retaining ring on. Move this out of the way. Go ahead and set the outer stub shaft in the vise. All right, so let's clean the grease off of my punch here and off my hammer. So here's the new cage assembly. Now, when these go in, if you should have been paying attention to how it come apart, but if you look at it, there's a neck down area that goes around the axle shaft where the splines are at. And then if you look at it this way, you can see it's coned this direction. It's a little less rounded this way and a little more tapered in this way. This taper on the outer race goes facing away from, it goes facing inward, so it goes facing up, so in towards the center of the vehicle. The reduced area out here goes down into the into the sphere here. So again, you'll want to kind of orientate this, find a window, fish it down in. I actually went in fairly good. So once you get it down in there, go ahead and rotate it around. Ball wants to keep falling through on me. Better make sure I got this, rotate this around. Make sure it's still orientated correctly. Yep, it is. Okay. And just keep working it around, back and forth, side to side. So this one I just put in. Now I'll knock it down, which will drive the other side up. Go ahead and lay the ball in. There we go. Last remaining two. Okay. Bingo. Okay, and that shaft is rebuilt. Nice and snug in there. Now, what you want to do is put some grease down inside. I'll usually put some down in through here, and then I'll go ahead and put some up through the Zerk in the end. Now, originally these had the seat style that took the little needle and pressed it off. I went ahead and just put regular Zerks in so I could grease it. Now, when it comes to grease, I recommend using their grease, the RCV synthetic moly infused grease. I've run, I think it's made by Valvoline. Ford recommends one that has, it's an EP grease, but it has moly in it. For their ball joints and so forth. I think that's a really good grease. I use that on all my ball joints. You don't want to use that in particular on, like, say, a U-joint because it will impede the needles rolling around. But on anything where there's hard contact like this, I really like using grease with moly. So for most items, I use the EP with moly of the Valvoline grease. But for RCV shafts, I actually do use their grease. So it is spendy, but when you spend that kind of money on axle shafts, you might as well use what they recommend in it. So I keep one loaded up. I have it written, RCV moly written on it. So this grease gun is dedicated to just that. So I'll go ahead and work some grease in around the perimeter and around each ball. Go ahead and put a little bit in each in the pocket there, and then when you service these, or when you get a rule of thumb is just whenever you service your vehicle, just go ahead and put, I think they recommend 10 pumps. So I usually put, say 8 to 10 pumps in. Now, it does have a tendency to start working its way out around the boot. And so you'll get the moly grease around the outside. It's not that big a deal to, when you've got it up in the air or you're inspecting it or whatever, to just, I'll grab a towel with a little bit of brake wash on it and grab a hold of the, I don't even need to pull the tire off, just when I'm doing a pre-trip inspection. Grab the tire as I'm turning it, just wipe the grease off, and then you got a nice shiny boot again. Okay, once you get it to this point, go ahead and lock it down in. Shaft's locked in. Try not to knock your cabinets around, bang your cabinets around. So there we go. And then okay, nice. I just put enough in it to where you start seeing the grease moving in there. Try not to waste the expensive grease. Wipe as much off inside the bell as you can. And this one's ready to reassemble. Again, I won't go through all the assembly procedures. Reassembly's opposite of taking it apart. Go ahead and the only thing I will recommend is putting some grease out on the outer or on the inner splines so that it slides through that seal going into the center differential. And then just go ahead and finish assembling that side. Lower that pull jack or jack stand down. Raise the other side up. And repeat for the other side. So I hope this was helpful. Like I said, just a quick little video of some routine maintenance on the front axle, Dana 44, and replacing the RCV, rebuilding the RCV shafts with rebuild kits. So appreciate you taking the time to watch. And if you like the video, thumbs up, give me a thumbs up. Comments I welcome. So thank you for watching.